I'm excited to talk to you today about an interesting poem dealing with one of literature's long-standing controversies. Uh, Shakespeare obviously is one of the most famous writers in history, if not the most famous. But there's a sort of a lack of facts about things that actually occurred in his life. We don't have a whole lot of information about what he in particular was doing himself. A lot of times, the evidence that we come to regarding his works are things that we just have to gather from the plays themselves. So there's been this ongoing debate. And I want to talk today about this interesting poem that has been written that sort of discusses this idea, the possible authorship considerations regarding Shakespeare's plays. This poem about this issue is called Much Noise About a Nobody, and it's written by Clemens Huenerberg of Germany. It's a really interesting take. It dives into all of these considerations, does it in sort of a classical meter. It has a really nice rhythm to it. It has a lot of excellent rhyme, a lot of enthusiasm as well. It's also based off of another famous poem by Roald Dahl called The Pig. So this is an interesting piece of work that deals with the Shakespeare authorship controversy, the idea that he didn't believe his work, he didn't write the plays himself. There have been lots of other theories as to who possibly did. Marlowe is a common consideration. Marlowe, who died at a young age, allegedly, but we don't actually know what happened to him. Some people say that he might have been responsible for some of the works. There have been more than 50 other suggestions. There are people who do insist quite persuasively that William Shakespeare is the author of the plays. Stephen Greenblatt, author of Will and the World, perhaps the most famous biography about William Shakespeare, tries to make a pretty solid case that Shakespeare is in fact the author. But this poem here by Clemens Huenerberg is sort of a comic, interesting take on this issue, in which its narrator is so bothered by the idea, the consideration, the possibility that perhaps Shakespeare has gained this fame, despite the fact that he didn't write the poems, that the narrator actually approaches this man Shakespeare and sort of confronts him and even batters him a little bit in an effort to get him to confess the falsehood. So here's the poem: Much Noise About a Nobody. A nobody once in Stratford dwelt, who o'ernight became the bard they felt. It quickly made me wonder at what sort of man was this from Strat. To everybody it seemed plain he had a most fantastic brain. There was no book he hadn't read, his plays and poems were in his head. He knew Italian tales so well, his science knowledge was really swell. I heard all this, but in the end one question drove me round the bend. How could he achieve knowledge so vast? No one has provided an answer that lasts. I simply couldn't puzzle out what the mystery was all about. Leaving one at the crux, why was his name on all the books? So you can understand my thought better, Will wrote no book, no bill, no letter. Barely could he sign his name, that bard never spelled it the same. His last will listed odds and ends, but no scripts, no books, no pens. Even more, no contemporary epicists mentioned the Stratfordian as the bard we missed. My giant brain went round and round, but alas, no answer could be found. Then one night I leapt like a ballet dancer and yelled, "By God, I've found the answer!" Brokers want his books page by page to earn themselves a tremendous wage, and they want his fantastic plots to show in their globes and shops. They've changed the Stratford monument, but there was no pen or parchment. Shaxper's inflated reputation is the reason for this falsification. Such thoughts are not designed to give me great peace of mind. If I could meet that false man Shack, I'd pour a sack of wool upon his back. Then I'd let out a mighty roar and push him to the floor. Then I'd give him a grisly kick. But let's not talk much of it, except that you must understand why I'd shake him with my hands. It would take 1 hour till he spoke the truth, however it sounded very confused. I'd shout, "Don't be a joker." He'd admit, "I was not the bard, but a broker." Shakespeare was just an agent and a transactor for someone else. That's the missing factor. Finally, I'd finished the interview and wonder what else I had to do. Slowly I'd scratched my brainy head, and with a little worry I'd said, "I'd feel a fairly powerful hunch that it comes to the public crunch." He'd likely disavow all that's fake, but I stand up for the true Shakespeare's sake. The man from Stratford is only a poor agent, and nobody knows the true claimant. Whoever wrote all the plays, I hope you see the air of the Stratfordian's ways. The man we call Shakespeare is only a poor agent, and nobody knows the play's true claimant. So that's the poem, Much Noise About a Nobody, by Clemens Huenerberg. And here we see, using its meter, using its rhyme, it sort of has that really nice lilting action to it. It calls into question this idea of whether Shakespeare is in fact the author, a question that has been highly debated over the years. And ultimately, I think it's kind of comic to consider the whole entire idea of authorship in and of itself. Who is truly the writer of any work? And I wonder even if we could ask, did Clemens Huenerberg really write this poem?